Hello, our story today is based on Judges chapter 7, and it's called Why God Gives Us More Than We Can Handle. Now, the next time someone says that God doesn't give us more than we can handle, point them to Judges chapter 7. God instructs Gideon to take on over 100,000 enemy soldiers with just 300 of his own. This really places it in the category of more than you can handle. Imagine how Gideon and his servant Purah must have felt trying to come to grips with this humanly impossible assignment. Standing on the side of Mount Gilboa, Gideon gazed over the plain of Jezreel, which sprawled beneath him northward to the hill of Moreh. The plain was a sea of tents, teeming with Midian warriors. That morning, the Lord judged Israel's army of 32,000, too big to face Midian's 100,000 warriors. Even outnumbered 3-1, Israel would think of himself more highly than he ought to think when God gave him victory, Romans 12:3. So Gideon had announced that whoever was afraid was free to go home. Well, when 22,000 soldiers took him up on the offer, Gideon had to quiet his own fear. Now Israel was outnumbered more than 10-1. But God was with them, and he had overcome such odds before. Oddly, the Lord considered these odds still too much in Israel's favor. So in obedience to the Lord's instruction, Gideon brought his small, thirsty army down to the spring of Harod. He gave his servant Purah the strangest command of his brief military career. Observe all the men as they drink. Have everyone who laps his water like a dog stand off to the side. Well, Gideon supervised the selection, but when he saw so few were chosen, he just let Purah finish the count, and he climbed back up Gilboa to pray and survey. It wasn't long before Purah emerged from the trees. So, what's the total? 300, sir, said Purah. Gideon chuckled to himself. 300. He looked back toward the human horde in the valley and was quiet for a moment. That's less than I expected. Yes, sir, said Purah. Thankfully, 300 doesn't reduce our strength very much. Gideon breathed deeply. No, Purah. The 300 are not the reductions. They are the army. The others are the reductions. Purah stood dazed for a moment, staring at Gideon. 300 are the army? Gideon nodded slowly, still looking into the Midian plain. But that's not an army. That's how many should be guarding the army's baggage. Purah stepped up beside Gideon, and together they watched smoke columns rising from 10 times more cooking fires than they now had warriors. Purah shook his head and said, even if we were all like the mighty men of old, 300 cannot overcome 100,000, he paused. And we're not mighty men. Another pause. And there are more than 100,000 down there. Both were silent for a while. In the quiet, the Lord spoke to Gideon. With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and the Midianites into your hand, and let all the others go, every one to his home. Judges 7:7. Then Gideon said to Purah, during the Exodus, how many mighty men did it take to destroy the Egyptian army and part the Red Sea? Purah thought briefly. None. And how many did it take to tear down Jericho's walls? None. How many did it take to feed 2 million people in the wilderness every day for 40 years? None. I get your point. In our people's history, the mightiest have not been the strongest, Gideon said. The mightiest have been those who trusted the Lord and obeyed him, no matter how impossible things appeared. God has promised us that Midian will be defeated. He has chosen only 300 of us. We will obey, and he will act. And when Gideon falls, it will be clear to everyone who failed him. Then he looked at Purah and smiled. Maybe the Lord just needs us to guard his baggage. Purah didn't laugh. He only replied, we should dismiss the others then, right? Gideon nodded. Later that night in the tiny camp, Gideon lay praying. Every plan to immobilize 300 against 100,000 seemed ludicrous. Suddenly, he was aware of a presence. He sat up. His heart was racing. The Lord said, arise and go down against the camp, for I have given it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp with Purah your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterwards your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp. Judges 7, 9-11. Gideon nudged Purah and whispered, "Let's go." "Where are we going?" Purah whispered back, getting up quickly. "To the Midian camp, just you and me. The Lord has something he wants to show us." They quickly crept down the nearest Midian outpost, veiled by the clouded sky, and saw two inattentive guards talking. Just as they got within earshot, one said, "I had a strange dream before being woken for duty tonight." "Tell me," the other said. "This cake of barley came tumbling down into our camp, crashed into the tent, turned it over, and flattened it." The other guard looked at him, alarmed, and said, "I know what that means. The cake can be none other than Gideon, the son of Joash. God has given us all into his hand." Gideon and Purah looked at each other with the same stunned expression. With renewed faith, Gideon and Purah roused their mini army and launched a night attack. Their surprise threw the Midians into a panic, and they slaughtered each other in confusion. It was a rout. Not one of Gideon's 300 perished in the battle. God gave Gideon's army more than they could handle to force them to rely wholly on him. When we're confronted with an impossible situation or trial, Gideon's 300 soldiers preach to us that salvation is from the Lord, Psalms 37:39, and that if God is for us, who can be against us, Romans 8:31. God does not intend for those verses to be more platitudes. He intends for us to cast all our anxieties on the mass of truths, to receive more than conquerors' confidence and peace, no matter what we face. Verse 37. It is not a hyperbole to say that Jesus' defeat of our sin dwarfs Gideon's defeat of Midian. Compared to overwhelming God's wrath against our sin, defeating 100,000 Midianites is very small. And if God did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Romans 8:32. God certainly does give us more than we can handle, and he does it to make us rely not on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. 2 Corinthians 1:9. If you're facing overwhelming adversity and you wonder how God can possibly deliver you and work it for your good, Romans 8:28, then take heart from Judges 7, Romans 8, and 2 Corinthians 1. When God gives you more than you can handle, he's giving you the joy of experiencing his power to do the humanly impossible, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of man, but in the power of God. 1 Corinthians 2:5. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.